Welcome to Life After, a podcast for women to take you from feeling like you're just surviving to thriving, to creating a life you really love. Expect to discover tips and tricks to get there. Each episode will have actionable steps to empower you to make changes. I started this podcast because I've been through it all, from getting out of a marriage with a narcissist to completely rebuilding my life. And now I'm on a mission to help you too. You can change your life. It's absolutely possible. Life can still be beautiful, meaningful, fun, and fulfilling, even if things don't turn out the way you planned. Deschene. Sometimes things don't work out, not because you don't deserve it, but because you deserve so much more. Unknown. When things don't go as planned, it's an opportunity to create a new plan. Also unknown. She stood in the storm, and when the wind did not blow her way, she adjusted her sails. Elizabeth Edwards. Be thankful for the roadblocks, closed doors, and detours. They protect you from paths and places not meant for you. Unknown. I'm surprised by how many of these quotes I can't attribute to the original source. That doesn't make them any less true. In this episode, we are going to talk about what to do when things don't go as planned. We talk a lot about adversity and challenge in this podcast. I'd like to shift a little bit in this episode and really focus on what to do when your life isn't going as planned. Of course, this would or could be a result of adversity or challenges, of course. However, there's a difference between talking theoretically about challenges and the best case approaches to handling those challenges or that adversity. And it's quite another to be smack dab in the middle of it, trying to navigate the realities of your situation while also trying to live your life. These are different things. As you guys know, I'm always happy to give tips and tricks for how to get through adversity. And these still all apply, even when you're shifting because things aren't going as planned, right? Might not feel as serious or as challenging as going through an adversity is a big word, right? It makes us feel like it's really, really something serious. And yet, more often, we just find that life isn't going the way we thought it would, that we're not on track. And so these same tips that we would use for managing a true adversity, a really serious event in our lives, we can use to get ourselves back on track. So the first is to manage your stress, right? You always want to, if you don't have a self-care routine, you always want to try to build one. And if you do have a self-care routine, you want to continue it, right? It's so easy to stop focusing on our self-care and the things that we need when we're feeling discombobulated from our lives not going like we think they should be. The next, and this could be considered part of self-care or it could be considered separate, be sure to get at least 7 to 8 hours of sleep. I've done actually a fair bit of research on sleep in the last, several months, year. And it appears that 7 to 8 hours is kind of that sweet spot. So really I know lots of people are now talking about creating sleep routines, how they settle in before bed, they let their brains know, they turn off their phones an hour before bed to get that blue light impact, to get the blue light that comes off of your phone not to impact your sleep. But be sure to get 7 to 8 hours of sleep. The next one is also one that people often overlook. When you're managing your stress and you're managing your self-care, drink lots of water. We have a tendency to not do this one, and it's one of the things that really benefits you physically. Keep a routine. How often have I talked about the importance of routine? Actually, I have an episode in the first season. I can't remember what number it is, but it's within the first 10 episodes, I believe, about routine. And it is my number one best listened to episode that doesn't include a guest. So keep a routine. There are so many benefits to that. And if you really want to dive deep, go back to that episode in season 1. And finally, in managing your stress, get outside, get back into nature, go on a walk, walk the dog, go out in the yard, garden, dig in dirt. Us reconnecting with nature and getting outside really helps us provide some perspective in our lives. One of the things I read recently, I might not get this exactly right, so forgive me for that. But there is something about awe that increases our level of happiness. I think that that's the way it went. In any case, having awe in your life really improves your mindset and your levels of happiness. And getting out into nature, getting outside, is one of the quickest and easiest ways I've found to really tap into that awe factor. The next tip is keep thinking about what's possible, even if it's completely impossible, even if it's ridiculous, like I'm going to win the $2 billion lottery, even though I don't play the lottery, right? Even when we're able to think of things that seem completely impossible to have happen, completely unlikely, it still opens up your brain to think of ways to recenter and out of the box solutions when your life isn't going as planned. It's really, and I would say it's kind of a fun exercise. If you are in a situation where you're like, how did I end up here? This is not what I was thinking. Sitting down and thinking of a list of, well, optimally a list of 50. And if that feels overwhelming, do 25 or 30. Just create a list of all the ways that you can get your life back on track. And again, pardon me, it could be as simple as I'm going to run away and join the circus, right? It's ridiculous. You're likely not going to run away and join the circus. But when you feed your brain possibilities and you open up your mind to what could be, your brain's going to start focusing on things that, even when you're not consciously thinking about it, that are going to give you solutions. Okay, the next one, this one might be a little harder to do in practice, and that is acknowledge that things aren't going to plan. Right? We are so accustomed to being like, nope, 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 not a problem. Nope, I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm fine. Don't play the ostrich by sticking your head in the sand. That's never going to help you realign and get things back on track. When things aren't going as planned and you acknowledge that, it does exactly what the last suggestion does, is it opens up the opportunity for your brain to be thinking of plan B or plan C or plan D. And there's a whole alphabet. So you've got lots of options there. You got to acknowledge where you are, though, in order to address what your next steps are. The next tip is to remind yourself that you can. Instead of thinking, I can't do that, I can't do this, This is another way to really start thinking outside the box. And we get really stuck when we can't see when an option. When it's kind of a double-edged sword, right? We get stuck because we can't see an option. When we can't see an option, we get more stuck. So, in order to work through when things aren't going like you planned them to, or you don't feel like your life is on track, is to remind yourself of things that you can do. What can I do? What can I do in this situation? Moving away from the I can'ts. Find examples where you can, or even more importantly, find examples where you have, using evidence of something you've done in the past is always really helpful. And I know I've said this on the podcast several times. For me, when I am struggling through something, I often think to myself, I ran a marathon. I can do this. So find evidence in the past where you've had to pivot, where you've had to make a shift, where you've had to change, where things weren't going to plan and you did something completely that you didn't ever think you were going to do. Find that evidence to remind yourself that you can. And then stay open to the possibilities that your brain comes up with. That's part of the key in that one. When we're really in it and we're trying to manage our lives, raising kids, going to school, working full time, helping family members, volunteering in our community, let's face it, this list could go on endlessly of the things that we have to do in our lives. Actually spending the time and energy it takes to make changes and stay grounded and feel balanced and just simply to manage is a lot. We have a lot going on in our lives. And I found that when you're really in it, it's a daily practice, a consistent showing up for yourself that truly gets you through it. And in that daily practice, doing all of those tips I just gave you, particularly the self-care and the stress management tips in the beginning, are going to be those things that help you get through it. Ultimately, having a mindset that everything works out is also incredibly helpful. I went to the beach recently, and I was walking on the beach, and this nice gentleman stopped me, and we were chatting a little bit, and he started to tell me about his own life and what was happening with it. And he wasn't from here. He was from the Midwest, and he was in the middle of what he thought was kind of a breakup, but there was some, he was unsure and there was some confusion and they didn't really know how they were going to work it out. And I looked at him and said, it's going to work out. It always works out. And he looked at me and that kind of stopped him and he raised his eyebrows and I said, it does. I said, in 6 months, and he piped in, maybe a year. I said, in 6 months, you're going to look back and you're going to say, I met that woman on the beach and she was right. It did work out. Right? It does work out. Things work out. And one of the things about having a positive mindset is not that toxic positivity of, oh, everything is so great. It's so fantastic. That's my Pollyanna-ish voice. It's not that. It's understanding that though we have those ups and downs, we still maintain having a positive mindset so that we move through life more like a wave, right? Where those ups and downs are much less steep and much smoother. This helps us avoid the peaks and valleys, which really makes working through unintended plans so much harder. We want to learn to work through the things that we're facing when they don't go as planned, and to do so in a way that we know it's going to be okay. It's not that we ever get away from there being challenges or our life not being exactly what we thought, right? That's going to happen. How do you make it more like a wave where you're just moving through things more seamlessly and you're working with the water instead of against it? So let's get back to the job, relationship, and kids examples. The fact of the matter is, the next job is going to come, and likely it's going to be a better job, a better fit, or a better team. Also, the next relationship is going to work out, and maybe it won't be with your usual quote unquote type. There's someone out there that's going to see you and love you for you. You know, I think one of the hardest things to keep a positive mindset about is our children, because watching them grow up and become independent and leave is really bittersweet for most of us. Yet it's our job to raise them so they can do just that, go out and become independent and be their own people in the world. The reality of that change in our lives when they do that, and frankly, the subsequent grief and loss that we may feel when our kids head out on their own, can still be seen as a positive transition, even when you're facing the grief behind it. I'm in that specific transition myself right now, my youngest just having turned 18. Even with the joy of him becoming an adult, it's intermixed with the grief of how our relationship is changing. There's something really incredible about what happens next for both of us. What is the next thing going to look like? What choices open up as a parent once your kids have found their own independence? That's something that we can focus on. And it's not so much that life isn't going as planned, because we intend for our kids to grow up and find their independence and move on in their lives. But there's a lot of things that can happen in that space that don't go as we think they should or as we want them to, that aren't working as we'd like them to have been. So really keeping an eye out for what your next opportunity, what your next choice is, and stay really grounded in what that looks like. This is a really straightforward way to manage when you're trying to work through things not going exactly as you planned them to be. Ultimately, life just simply doesn't always go as planned. We might not be able to do anything to change that. We do have choices, however, about how to adapt, get new ideas, maintain our flexibility, and then pick a new option. When we're really well resourced by using those earlier tips that I gave you, the fact is that getting back on track happens more quickly and easily. This podcast is a valuable resource for anyone seeking to make meaningful changes in their life. I'm here to support you on your unique journey, offering guidance and encouragement every step of the way. There will be new episodes on the second and fourth Wednesday every month. Please follow on your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss any episodes. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to today's episode on what to do when things don't go as planned. Remember, you have the ability to choose plan B or C or D to recover and move on. Sometimes picking another option is the best course of action to change our lives for the better. As we wrap up, here's the thing. I've made every mistake. I've literally been there and done that. It's one step at a time, and you'll get there. There's hope. You've got this. If you're struggling in a relationship and wondering if it might be controlling, you're not alone. Download my free PDF at locatecoaching.com/free gift to help you find clarity and confidence. I hope you have a fantastic day, and I'll see you soon.